All right, after more than 5 months of promises, Senator Chuck Schumer, Cory Booker, and Ron Wyden have finally unveiled a draft of their federal cannabis reform bill. Now, the sweeping bill seeks to decriminalize cannabis, regulate it like tobacco pretty much, and help those harmed by punitive drug policy. So here to talk more about this is the woman we always go to when we're talking anything in the cannabis space, Cheddar cannabis reporter Chloe Aiello. Chloe, can you just break down what this bill is and really what it entails?
Hey Alicia, so just like you said, after 5 months of waiting and teasing from Senator Schumer and his partners in this bill, Senator Wyden, Senator Booker, we finally have a draft version of the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act. So what it does is seek to decriminalize cannabis by removing it from the Controlled Substances Act, thereby putting it into the hands of the states whether they want to legalize cannabis or not. It maintains that state laws will continue to oversee possession, production, distribution of cannabis. It removes cannabis from the purview of the DEA, instead assigning other agencies like the FDA, the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms in charge of it. In the DEA, the FDA, it even establishes the Center for Cannabis Products. It does permit interstate commerce, except to states that have prohibited cannabis, although those states actually can't prevent it from passing through their borders to get to another state. It establishes 21 years old as the age to purchase cannabis, and it establishes a limit of about 10 ounces for purchasing cannabis. It does require studies on the impact of legalization on things like crime, calls to poison control center, and drug driving. It also imposes federal excise taxes, similarly to the way alcohol and tobacco are taxed, starting at 10% and then creeping their way on up to 25% over a couple of years. This might sound like a lot, but there are some dispensations for small businesses which can pay up to half of that. It is important to note, as I mentioned, that this is just a draft, so the senators are going to be seeking input from key stakeholders on this, and that will ultimately shape whether this bill has enough support, what it ultimately looks like. And earlier today, I did have a chance to speak to Curaleaf CEO Joe Bayern about what he was hoping to hone in on when it comes to sharing his feedback. Take a listen.
In order to do that, and in order to build a healthy industry, we need to be thinking about banking aspects of bringing banking changes to the laws in the U.S., providing capital not only for companies like Curaleaf, but for social equity players who are going to be entering the marketplace and entering the industry are going to need access to capital and banking services. And of course, working with regulators to ensure that cannabis is being used responsibly.
So you heard it, folks. Banking and access to capital. Those are the issues on the mind of the CEO of one of the biggest cannabis companies in the U.S.
Chloe, you mentioned there a few moments ago so much packed into this draft, but I wonder if we can hone in on how does it address equity?
Yes, this bill is very focused on social equity. It actually establishes 3 different grant programs designed to do a number of things. For one thing, funnel funds to nonprofits for communities that have been harmed by the drug war. Another is to ensure that states and localities have funds to support small businesses that are owned by socially and economically disadvantaged minorities. And another actually helps to prevent and minimize barriers for entry to individuals who have been adversely affected by the war on drugs. It also directs the Bureau of Labor Statistics to collect data on demographics of the industry. It directs expungement for nonviolent federal cannabis offenses within 1 year. It also permits sentencing review for those who are serving nonviolent cannabis sentencing. It also prohibits discrimination based on cannabis use or history of convictions, and that for federal benefits as well as for non-citizens, so things like immigration. Senator Chuck Schumer praised the social equity components of this bill during a press conference this afternoon. Take a listen.
I was the first Democratic leader to come out for the legalization of marijuana, and I will use my clout as majority leader to make this a priority in the Senate. As my colleagues and I have said before, the war on drugs has really been a war on people, particularly people of color. The Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act would help put an end to the unfair targeting and treatment of communities of color by removing cannabis from the federal list of controlled substances.
So you're really hearing him praising the social equity component there.
I guess the biggest question to ask when we're looking at this draft of this long-awaited bill is how likely is it to get passed?
Well, we just heard from Senator Schumer there, him saying that he will use his clout as a Senate Majority Leader to help make this a primary issue in the Senate. But really, it's not at all clear whether this bill, once it is formally introduced, will pass. As we know, it does need 60 votes in the Senate to get by. And, you know, we're not sure that it actually has that. Although cannabis issues have broad support in the Democrat-controlled House, they have been less popular in the Senate. You know, even on 420, when Senator Schumer took a moment to sort of praise cannabis on the floor of the Senate, Politico at the time reported that there were 2 Democrats at the time who did not support cannabis legalization. He'll need those votes and the votes of 10 other Republicans if he needs support. And there's one other, you know, big barrier standing in the way, which is President Biden. He has said he is supportive of medical cannabis legalization and decriminalization through rescheduling of cannabis into a lower schedule in the Controlled Substances Act. This bill doesn't do that. It removes cannabis altogether from the Controlled Substances Act. So we'll have to see if even when if it gets through the Senate, if it gets through the House, if it will even make it into law. I will point out, though, that hasn't stopped the cannabis industry from really celebrating this as a historic moment. We heard from Eric Altieri, who is the executive director of an advocacy organization in cannabis called NORML. He said, quote, "The days of federal prohibition are numbered." Joe Bayern even praising the bill, saying that it's important to continue to make incremental steps forward. Even if not all of this bill passes, as long as parts of it do, that will be progress.
All right, so some celebration in the cannabis industry despite the barriers as you outlined ahead for this bill. Thank you so much, Cheddar cannabis reporter Chloe Aiello.